My wife thought the building's ghosts were a joke. Now I see her walking with them. My wife is dead because we didn't fucking listen. That's it. That's the whole story. The building manager, a man whose skin looked like old parchment stretched over a bird skeleton, gave us one rule when we moved in. 1. The rooftop is locked after 11, he'd rasped, his eyes the color of dishwater. For your own safety, I'm a horror writer. My name is Iago Valerius. For a decade, I've made my living inventing monsters, mapping out the architecture of fear. I thought I knew its shape. When my last book hit the lists, I moved my wife, Lyra, and our 7-year-old daughter, Elodie, to a place that felt like it was breathing history. We chose the Alaster, a Gothic behemoth of brick and wrought iron looming over New Orleans. Locals said the place had bad blood. To me, that was just good marketing. The Alaster was beautiful in the way that bones are beautiful. Our apartment on the 6th floor had ceilings so high our voices echoed, and windows that watched the city with a vacant, knowing stare. Elodie was obsessed with the old service elevator, a rattling brass cage that groaned like a dying man. Lyra, though, she was obsessed with the roof. She'd seen it from the street, a sprawling terrace with a crumbling stone balustrade, a throne room overlooking the glittering black heart of the city. It feels closer to the sky up there, she'd said, her eyes shining. We have to see it at night. I was hesitant. I don't like breaking rules, not when they're delivered like a death sentence. But one humid Saturday, with jazz music slithering up from the street and Elodie sleeping soundly, Lyra took my hand and led me to the stairwell. The roof was breathtaking. The city lights bled into the low-hanging clouds, and the Mississippi River was a slash of polished obsidian. We just stood there for an hour, wrapped in the warm, heavy air. Nothing happened. I felt foolish for even being worried. A few nights later, a thunderstorm rolled in, and Lyra wanted to watch the lightning lance the sky. We went up again. This time, we weren't alone. A man and a woman stood by the balustrade, their backs to us, motionless as statues. As we approached, they turned in perfect sync. They were handsome, with sharp cheekbones and dark, placid eyes. They introduced themselves as Remus and Cassia from the 4th floor. The conversation was strange, stilted. We'd ask a question, and they'd answer with a non sequitur, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. "It's a long way down," Remus said suddenly, looking over the edge. Cassia just smiled at Elodie, who had woken up and followed us. "Such a sweet little thing," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "She'll sleep so well tonight." We left feeling unnerved. That night, the screaming started. Elodie's room. We burst in to find her sitting bolt upright in bed, eyes wide with a terror so pure it felt electric. "What is it, baby? A nightmare?" Lyra rushed to her side. Elodie shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She pointed a trembling finger at the corner of the room. "The wet man was there," she whispered. "He kept saying my name. Over and over." I flicked on the light. The corner was empty, but there was a small, dark puddle on the hardwood floor, already seeping between the boards. Lyra told her it was a dream, tucked her back in, hummed a lullaby until her breathing evened out. But when we got back to our bedroom, I couldn't shake the image of that puddle. I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, a phantom itch deep in the muscle of my jaw. Later, I woke up choking. Something was moving inside my own cheek. A squirming, parasitic crawl. I could feel them, dozens of them, a nest of soft, blind things tunneling through the tissue. They weren't worms, they were thicker, like grubs, and I could feel their tiny legs scratching against the bone. I scrambled out of bed and into the bathroom, clawing at my face. I dug my nails into my skin, trying to rip them out, my own guttural screams sounding alien in the tiled room. I could feel them popping under the pressure, a wet, sick feeling. I looked up at the mirror, expecting to see my face torn open, a bloody ruin. Nothing. My skin was smooth, untouched. The sink was pristine. The only marks on my face were 4 red furrows from my own fingernails. From the bedroom, Lyra called out, "Iago? Are you okay?" I gripped the sink, my knuckles white. It wasn't a dream. I fucking felt it. The next night, Elodie screamed again. This time, when we ran in, she wasn't pointing at the corner. She was pointing at the other side of her own bed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Someone was lying next to her. Under the covers, head on the pillow beside hers, was a man, sleeping peacefully. It took my brain a second to process the face, to recognize the stubble on the chin, the shape of the nose, the hairline. It was me, a perfect, placid copy of myself lying next to my daughter. Lyra let out a strangled gasp and snatched Elodie from the bed. I lunged forward, a roar of pure, primal rage building in my chest. And the bed was empty. The sheets were smooth. We didn't sleep. We left every light in the apartment burning. I sat at the kitchen table, the clatter of my typewriter keys, the only sound besides the frantic thumping of my own heart. At 3:13 a.m., a sharp, rhythmic tap-tap-tap echoed through the apartment. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the window. The sixth-floor window. I ripped the curtain aside. A single, bloody child's handprint was smeared on the glass, small and stark against the blackness outside. By morning, it was gone. The night after that was the worst. Elodie's shriek was different. It wasn't scared. It was the sound an animal makes when it knows it's about to be torn apart. We found her cowering at the foot of her bed, pointing up. My gaze followed her finger. My blood turned to ice water. Hanging upside down from the ceiling, swaying gently like carcasses on hooks, were Remus and Cassia. Their faces. Christ. Their mouths were ripped open into impossible, jagged smiles that stretched from ear to ear, filled with broken, black teeth. Their eyes were just sockets, dripping a thick, black tar that sizzled when it hit the floorboards. The sound of their necks creaking, a dry, popping noise, filled the silence. They were smiling at us. I grabbed Elodie and ran. I didn't stop until we were huddled together in the living room, Lyra sobbing next to me, repeating no, 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 like a mantra. The Alaster was closing in. A young artist who lived on the second floor cornered me in the lobby a few days later, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "You hear them, right?" he whispered, grabbing my arm. "In the vents. They're telling me to draw what's in the walls." The next day, he was found at the bottom of the main stairwell. The police said he fell. His bones were twisted into shapes they shouldn't have been able to make. I started taking the service elevator, the rattling brass cage, just to avoid the stairs. One night, I got in, and the gate slammed shut with a deafening clang. The car didn't go up. It went down. Past the lobby. Past the basement. The floor indicator lights went dark as it just kept sinking into the foundation of the building. Then the lights went out completely. I was plunged into a thick, suffocating blackness. Cold water began to seep around my shoes, rising fast. It smelled of rust and river mud. It was at my ankles, then my knees. I pounded on the gate, screaming, but the elevator just kept sinking. And from the darkness above me, a voice echoed down the shaft. "Daddy?" It was Elodie's voice, but it was wrong. Stretched thin, hollow. The water was at my chest now, impossibly cold. I screamed her name until my throat was raw. Then, blackness. I woke up in my own bed, gasping for air. My sheets were soaked with sweat. Lyra was staring at me, her face pale. "Iago, what's wrong? You were screaming in your sleep." "The elevator," I choked out, scrambling up. "It took me down. The water, I almost drowned." I looked down at my shoes, which I'd kicked off by the bed. My shoes, they have to be wet. Lyra just stared at them. They were bone dry. But as I looked closer, I saw it. A thin, dark line of silt caked into the crease where the sole met the leather. Impossible. The next morning, I cornered the building manager, whose name I learned was Mr. Soren. I showed him the silt on my shoe. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. Old. 12 years ago, he began, his voice barely a whisper. A couple lived on the 4th floor. Remus and Cassia. They seemed perfect, polite, quiet, but they were monsters. He told me they'd been luring children from the neighborhood into their apartment, doing unspeakable things. They believed that by consuming parts of them, they could steal their youth. When the residents finally found out, when they broke down the door and saw what was inside, the building itself passed judgment. They didn't call the police, Soren said, his gaze fixed on the old service elevator at the end of the hall. They dragged them down to the shaft. For 24 days, they kept them there. They did to them, piece by piece, what they had done to the children. On the 25th day, they dragged them to the roof and threw what was left over the side. My stomach churned. Why are you telling me this? Soren finally looked at me, and his watery eyes held a terrible certainty. Because that elevator shaft is soaked in their pain, their rage. The building remembers. And anyone who sees them on the roof after 11, it pulls you into their cycle. You get to live their last 24 days. Every night, a new horror. And on the 25th, he trailed off, shaking his head. They demand a trade. Their hunger is never satisfied. That afternoon, Elodie came home from playing in the hallway, clutching a small, intricately carved wooden box. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice tight. "Kasia gave it to me," she said, smiling. "She said they're secrets. If you swallow one, you're never scared again." I snatched the box from her. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like human hair, were a dozen small, polished river stones. They were warm to the touch and smelled faintly of iron. "Did you eat any?" I yelled, shaking her shoulders. "Elodie, did you eat one?" She just looked at me with calm, empty eyes. "Just one." "It doesn't hurt anymore, Daddy." That night, Lyra broke. She paced the apartment like a caged animal, her eyes wild. "It's you," she hissed, turning on me. "You and your goddamn stories. You invited them in. You see monsters everywhere, and you pulled them out of the page and into our lives. Lyra, that's not true." "You saw them too. I saw what you wanted me to see," she screamed, pressing her palms to her temples. She stumbled toward the balcony, throwing the doors open to the howling wind. "Maybe that's what they want. One of us." She looked back at me, rain or tears streaming down her face. "They showed me what they'll do to her, Iago," she whispered, her voice suddenly, terrifyingly calm. "It's the only way. A parent for a child." Her lips formed a final, silent word. "Sorry." Then she stepped off. I saw her body hit the courtyard bricks, the same bricks that had been stained with the blood of Remus and Kasia. I don't remember the police or the ambulance. I just remember getting back to the apartment, the door clicking shut behind me, the silence, a physical weight. And then, a soft tap, tap on the door. From the inside, my heart stopped. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. With a trembling hand, I unlatched the deadbolt and pulled the door open. They were standing there, Remus and Kasia, and between them was Lyra. She was whole, unbroken. Her skin was luminous, her eyes were bottomless pits, and her mouth was stretched into that same horrifying ear-to-ear smile. She didn't say a word. She just lifted one pale hand and pointed a single, silent finger toward Elodie's room. I slammed the door, threw the bolt, and didn't stop running. I scooped up a sleeping Elodie, left everything we owned, and fled into the night. The 6th floor of the Alastor is sealed now, welded shut. Sometimes, Mr. Soren still gets questions from new tenants about it. He just shakes his head and gives them the same warning he gave me. "Don't go on the roof after 11. If you do, the clock starts again. I thought we were safe. I thought we escaped." But last night, Elodie woke up crying. I went to comfort her, and as she drifted back to sleep, she whispered a name in her dreams. It wasn't Lyra. It wasn't Mom. She whispered, "Kasia."